Felt a little less sleepy. Oh, interesting. What did you do anything different that made you a little bit more lively? Yeah, so I just needed to finish this set before I elaborate. So I would say 80 to 90% of my life I think about things a lot. And um one of the things that really helped my quality of life was to find activities that I could do habitually that takes up as much of that resource as I can to distract myself from thinking about anything else. So, while that is the case, it's usually something extremely repetitive, extremely focus dominant, and also it tends to not have a goal in mind. However, when I'm thinking 90% of the time, when I'm planning these habits that I want, they tend to have habits that show improvement, or you can record them for fun. And what they are structured in is to discover if there's something interesting that will happen if I did something. So, for example, yeah, there is a great chance that this, at the end of a year, would show relatively something not interesting to someone who's looking for something, right? But I'm not looking for anything. So it's one of those things. Um, why do you travel to a different country, right? One way is when you plan to travel, you tend to have some ideas of what to expect, why you're going there. That's great. And usually 90% of the time, I'm totally on board. That's where I am. But 10% of the time, the stuff that I'm building up is when I just go there and find out what I'm going to discover, right? So the idea about me running every day I get up, and then every other day I do this, and every other day I do a workout in the evening before I go to bed, or close to when I go to bed, is generally to do something where I can simply have my mind and my body connected on one task, even for, I don't know, the 30 seconds that it takes me to do 10 pull ups, right? So that kind of stuff, um, I picked the kind of stuff is because it deals with reps in sets. So it's easily measurable, and you can uh up it and down it, like change it dynamically without having to think too much about it. So you just do more the next day, then more, then more. And what that helps with is it removes the complexity of the task. And maybe one day I might be really, really great at this, perhaps, at this task. But the goal of the task is to do it without the expectation of something happening. The idea is that you do it to work on your intuition. So you intuitively continue to mechanically do these things, which most physical activities tend to be that way to me. And I picked these activities because the more repetitive the activity is, the more it helps me focus on the task. If it becomes too dynamic, if the task becomes too dynamic, I will start to think about all the other things. So when I'm playing other video games, like where we're about to go into, we're going to play Yakuza again, my mind is constantly racing. It has so much time to do everything else. So when someone is busy slamming X, skipping dialogue, I do not skip those dialogue. In fact, this might be ironic, right? Ironic or counterintuitive is probably the word I would say. When someone reads very, very fast, it doesn't mean they are thinking very, very fast. In fact, generally speaking, if I had to take a slight hot take without digressing too far, when someone is skipping a task, they are working on their intuition, their expectations. They're filling in the blank. In fact, my mind is racing really, really fast, but it comes out as digesting things very, very slowly. So yeah, I do read progressively slower over time, actually, because the task of reading the words and taking the face value of the words, that's a repetitive task. So when you read a book, you read a sentence, someone's like, yeah, I got it. That's the idea. But for me, each word, each idea, how the words come together, my mind is wandering everywhere. So it takes me maybe 2 times, 3 times the amount of time for me to take in a sentence. So the more I practice these things 90% of the time, the more exhausting it becomes. So here, going to run, going to exercise, and going to do this, the main objective is to be maintenance, to reach maintenance and maybe improve over time. So I will probably get faster, more dexterous as I do this. And the main objective, the guaranteed objective, is that I don't grow slower over time, right? Or as I age, I'm maintaining it. I'm not being unused. I don't want to lose or unused skills I have. So I'm keeping the dexterity. The secondary goal that you could see is I might improve over time. That's great. That's a icing on the cake if I improve over time. And that's only the task-oriented thinking of this. The third thing is I can use this feeling, this focus, this mind connection, and I can apply it to something else. So like in the future, if I'm running, I can combine the feelings I get from this and running and create a cadence, a rhythm. And all this stuff relies on intuition. It's hard to process these things without literally doing them. So yeah, the concepts, like 90% of the time I could think of, oh yeah, if you run this way and then you establish that all these words just, they're vicarious. They don't have a literal experience. So now I'm developing literal experiences like literally running and whatnot. It doesn't mean intellectually you can't appreciate what it takes to be good at running, be good at stamina and dexterity. That I do the majority of my life. I do most of that, like, the whole being book smart and being, what is a good counterpart, like a street smart or application smart, right? So the idea is I take these things, they're meditative. So when I'm doing this, I'm zoning out. So I just had like I don't know if you look up, but there's 2 questionable users names, and I'm pretty sure both of them are operated by the same user, if I had to deduce. The same user is using auto-generated comments or comments that they deem auto-generated, right? And they place them in and they just talk, one question, one comment, one question, one comment, irrelevant of what I'm actually saying, right? So it's non-responsive. It's probably just some stock inputs, copy, paste over and over again. And those 2 individuals had the same frequency and same cadence. So it's probably two Twitch handles used by the same thing. And what they do is typically they pick a person who's all the way at the bottom, right? I don't know, 0 viewership or something, who thinks that they understand this person and why they're streaming and recording, and give a semblance of value to their life. Good for them, I suppose. But that might be their source. That might be what they do habitually to, I don't know, cope or do whatever their social experiments are. But, you know, those two that individual and I have a conflict of interest. So it's kind of like that. It's like, why do people do what they do? So for me, yeah, I just want to stay as good as I will be, I suppose, where I am now, which is where I am actually after today's day 14, which is the first week of month 2, and it's the second day. I can only do this 3 times a week. So 14, it would be the 4th week. It would be the 5th week, sorry. So it's the first week of month 2. And yeah, I'm 15 to 20% faster than I was before. So that's kind of nice. I have no milestones or no things in mind. I just got faster because I just got more faster and dexterous because I I enjoy doing it. Oh yeah, no. I banned those 2 Twitch handles. They're just used they're placeholder handles. They'll probably generate more if they wanted to participate again. That's generally how it goes. It's not really that big a deal. It happens most of the time. And in fact, what's unfortunate, in my opinion, is that since Osu is an unregulated, unmoderated brand or product, it actually happens a lot with Osu most of the time. Actually, it happens largely with Osu. So that's kind of the unfortunate part. It's the bad actors. And this type of experience is only unique to someone they find that is insignificant. Unfortunately for them, I hope they understand that one day they might tick off the a person who has very nothing to lose, right? I have something to lose. So, like, I value myself as someone who's not aiming to be a streamer, who likes to record and share his experiences just for posterity's sake. But one day they might pick someone who's desperate enough to really hunt them down. So, my advice to someone like that is stop trying to utilize without consent the low hanging fruit. It's, to me, it's low effort. They could do better, in my opinion. They could definitely use whatever skills of trolling and stuff in a way that would make them money or provide more value sentimentally to their time. But for me, it's another data point. It happens quite a lot, and generally speaking, this game in general selects for specific people who cope in a specific way. And though that guy who managed, in my opinion, probably manage or collaborate with another person are very characteristic. Less sleeping, actually, I have no idea. My days were pretty much the same. Interesting. Huh. Is that a good thing? Do you like being less sleepy during this hour? It seems a little late, so I don't know if that's ideal for you or not. But anyways, this is what I'm doing here. So I'm not aiming to improve, but I did improve, which is great. I would say, yeah, 15 to 20% faster already after 1 month, which uh I'd probably say it's beginner gains. Like, conservatively, I'm expecting the plateau to happen sometime around now, so maybe. And will I move on from this? I'll probably move on from the literal tapping of the thing and then come back to it. But the idea of what I'm doing with this will stay with me forever. Like I've been it's been with me since my 20s when I started doing this type of thing. So it's very relaxing. Like in fact, um a lot of times the whole point of me doing this is to not be engaging, which is kind of ironic. I know, it's counterintuitive. So my goal was to be really zoned in, which to me it's still secondary, right? If my goal here is to zone out, but I have a guest or someone I'm speaking to, I would still prioritize my primary goal, which is the sharing of the experience. Like where this very conversation is the primary objective of why I'm on Twitch, right? The whole idea of being on Twitch is to have conversation, and conversation juggling the thing I'm doing. If I didn't want conversation, I would do this without streaming it. I can record this without streaming it or interacting with someone. So, not to give you the false impression that I would feel inconvenience if something interrupts me. That's what I meant by there really isn't an objective to this, as in the literal tapping in Osu. There isn't an objective for it. The objective has largely always stayed the same. 95% of the time is the 5%. I'll give an example in a bit. 95% of the time, if I am streaming, I'm setting myself up for sharing my thoughts educationally, mentoring, and the stuff that I have written and said over and over again. The reason why I'm streaming is to share. So that has always been the objective, no matter what I'm doing, because I am intentionally and intentfully streaming something I'm doing, and that is the goal. So streaming comes before everything else. Otherwise, I wouldn't stream at all, and I would just do the activity for the secondary objective. I'm typically still a little active during this time. I don't think it makes too much of a difference, but I could feel like this. Interesting. Yeah, that's a great way to capitalize. It sometimes it could be something small, just one little breath at a time, reading one sentence in a book at a time. Actually, I thought about this one time where you have skills that you typically say, oh man, I wouldn't do that, like, oh, it's so hard. But what happens if you reduce it to the minimum unit and just squeeze it in whenever you feel you're a little more active, right? For example, reading one page. You find a book in a unit. Say you want to complete a book in 3 months. Let's say 3 months give you an average of 90 days. What if you're feeling a little spry, maybe 5 minutes or something, and you read one page of a 90-page book. I know. You're like, what books are 90 pages? Trust me, writing formats will accommodate 90. And see if you can read one page every single day for 90 days, and you've completed a book. This is my segue. I'll give you one example where this idea comes from in the reverse. There is I'm not sure if you're familiar, but George R. R. Martin, the author of A Song and Fire A Song of Fire and Ice, right? The person that ebook is, oh yeah, that's true. That's a good point. So Um, he did Game of Thrones, right? One of his books is Game of Thrones and all the other series of In a Song of Fire and Ice. He had an interview with Stephen King, who writes a different type of novel. Stephen King is like a really popular person who writes like psychological horror. Like he writes a lot of books, and I think it's between these two authors. So they had an interview and asked like, how do you write so many books? Like on the one hand, the other author spends years, maybe not even long, they might not even have longevity to complete their book series, and the other person just writes a book every year. Like we're talking about like mammoth 400 page books, right? And they asked this person, it's like, well, I told myself that I would write X number of pages every single day. And that was it. Like each day I get up habitually, I write X number of pages. And within the year, that's it. It wasn't about sitting down and continuously writing, like when you're lock yourself away 3 months and continuously write the task to the best of your ability. No, this person just wrote consistently in a smaller unit, in which sure, a person could write a year in a book. They can choose it to do in a month within the calendar year, or they can split it across. So for me, I'm more the former. I'm the guy who does a little every single day. The units and the task gets broken up to a reasonable amount of length of time that I would accomplish it. And the the effort barrier just is non-existent for me. I have tested if I am more successful and consistent if I were to do large tasks. That's what I did when I was younger. Like when I was younger, how do I study for exams? 18 hours the day before the exam. That's just it. Like I legit just everything in a single day. Not because I procrastinated to that day. I told myself that I will prepare for the exam the day before. So there's a really big difference between intentionally deciding when and where you do it. Obviously, when I was a teenager, I realized that I procrastinate a lot. So how do I get better at procrastinating? I intentionally set everything up to do it the day before. Yeah, that's it. And he's an extremely prolific writer. Stephen King is easily, it's not to say, like, we're not saying the subjective nature is like, is it good quality? Is it like great? Does it, the objective fact is he produces a lot of books, he writes a ton of books, and he is extremely lucrative author. And he is really influential, as in people approach him on it. So those are facts. Those are not subjectives. These things happen. Whether his books are high quality or could be higher quality if he decided to not do that and write all the book at once kind of deal, we may never know. But the idea is the difference between someone who struggles to write so many books and him. These are two great authors who are both lucratively successful and have many books. One finds it hard to consistently write the book, and the other does. Yeah, yeah. So it's great, but it's great. However, they are at opposite ends. So you ask yourself, do you want to try this stuff? When I was a teenager, I procrastinated a lot. Like I naturally procrastinate, as in I'll push off the stuff. So as I was getting older, once I left high school, my idea was, well, I do this skill. Yes, procrastination is a skill because you condition yourself to do it. Just ask someone who doesn't procrastinate and force them to procrastinate. They will struggle because they don't have the skills and time and conditioning to deal with that. So it is a skill, however you habitually acquired it in whichever manner. So I've acquired a habit of procrastinating. So when I got older, I found, how can I make that more efficient? Like, how do I play to that? So there are people who don't procrastinate. I met those people. When I got to college, I met my three best friends, Adam, Greg, and Eric, and they showed me that you don't procrastinate and it becomes a weight off your shoulder. So even then, I was still resistant. Like, I was still procrastinating. But the thing is, by then, I was procrastinating intentionally. So it was no longer procrastination, it was time management. I prefer to maximize my hours before an exam as opposed to divvying it up. Nowadays, it's a mix of both depending on the task. So, for example, if I were to run a marathon, I would not use the day before exam. It's just not possible. Like, for me, physically, I can't do that. I can't just go out and run, you know, a pre-marathon and then be good the next day. So there are tasks that are highly improbable. So I use different approaches. I used the approach that my friends taught me, but they applied it to things like schoolwork, projects, and stuff. They do little at a time. So I learned from them. And that's how I approach like video games and hobbies. They did the 40K thing for over the majority of their life. That's a little at a time every single day, like their dedication. So that's how I worked up my hobbies as well. So these are the quality of lifestyle stuff that I'm talking about. But in terms of procrastinating, what did I do to enhance my habit that is no longer procrastination? I learned to how to do brainstorming or keeping the ruminates. So here's the idea. I need to write an essay, and the essay is due 4 months from now. Well, you might be thinking, I could work on it a little at a time, like literally working on it. When you think of a procrastination as a task, you're asking yourself, I need to literally be doing it to be productive. That's where it falls short. That's when you become unattentive and you didn't find alternatives to it. So for me, I think of essay topics. I think of, oh yeah, that's a good idea. And so every time I did something, right? A procrastinator would think, oh man, I'm thinking about the exam. It's just like taking up my mind. Like I'm always thinking about it. It's ruining my things. Like, but you can flip the script. For me, when I have a project coming up that's due like 3 months down the line, I spend most of my time just brainstorming. So whenever someone says, "Oh, I don't want to think about the exam. I'm just going to push it off." I will think about the exam. I deliberately do so. So when I have a project or an exam coming up, when I'm doing an activity, I think about it and how it relates to that. So in the meantime, I'm actually literally preparing for it, but I'm not. I mean, I'm literally and figuratively. Literally is I'm not writing the exam right now, literally, but figuratively, and at the same time, you can interpret it as working towards the exam. I'm thinking about the exam topics. I'm weaving it into my life until that comes up. So by the time that comes up, those 18 hours, they carry all the weight of everything that I brainstormed up to that point. So by the time I get to I need to sit down and literally do the thing, I have already thought about it for several months straight. Instead of worrying and constantly reminding myself, oh, I don't want to be distracted. It's not a bad thing or a good thing unless you decide it is. It's a bad thing if you want to choose to ignore it because it's undesirable. It's a good thing if you choose to include it in everything because you'll remember it. So here's how I scored really, really great grades, only having to study right before the exam. Every single day, technically, I am already studying for the exam. I made it into I weaved it into my thoughts. So when I'm preparing for an interview, well, you could literally prepare for the interview, look up stuff and whatnot. But for me, I'm already preparing for my interview. I do it every single day. So that's how I approach skill work. All my skill work is finding ways to maximize everything I learn. How is Osu relevant? How is moving two fingers relevant to other things I'm doing? Well, by the time I encounter it, I'll know. It's like, oh yeah, this is how I talk about Osu when I'm talking about geopolitics in Russia, for example. How does that relate to Osu? Well, I can make an analogy about it. So everything I've learned reminds me of this is a hyperbole. Most of the things I learn in life mechanically or intellectually are relatable to everything else that I learn. So what happens is when I talk about Osu, I think about 80 to 90% of all the things that I've learned already. So I learn to not forget things. The biggest drawback to me personally is it becomes overwhelming and it becomes exhausting. And managing that stress of overthinking, overanalyzing, and constantly filled with too much ideas and picking one when you have to, like in a conversation, is extremely stressful. So I learned to develop habits to tell myself that, hey, this is a really demanding, repetitive task, and I can't think of anything else while doing it. What did I find that's really reliable? Physical fatigue in any manner is good enough to just completely block out my resources. Like when I'm running as fast as I can continuously every day, it is so hard for me to think anything else other than my lungs suck really, really bad. That's the only thought I can have. Like I can't start thinking, what are their studies? How do I improve my lung capacity while I'm dying, right? Like while I'm gasping for oxygen. So that's what I'm doing here too. Like my fingers are on fire. Like it is hurting, or not hurting in a bad way. It is like really stiff, and that's all I can focus on. There's no uh what if I increase the resolution between my middle finger and my pointer finger, like mid game? Like when you're doing it, you can't just start intellectually thinking, oh wow, that one feels different. I still do it though. Like I'm doing all I can to prevent myself from doing it. That's where the focus and the meditation is. Meditation is hard, so you can find other forms of meditation. And when you're doing a repetitive task, it's close to meditation. Meditation is about focusing on a single source, and that source is either very repetitive or low effort. And that's a really big disclaimer. Tapping once on your key and then tapping with your other finger, each individual rep is low effort. It's the culmination of the entire rep that makes it high effort. So endurance stuff is very, very appealing to people who need to develop a meditative state. So when you're breathing, while you're sitting and clearing your mind and you're constantly breathing and focused, that's a repetitive state. You're telling yourself, keep focusing on your breath, keep focusing on your breath. And that's what's creating the focus. It's kind of weird. It's kind of counterintuitive, but to become meditative, you're actually using high effort to focus on one thing. And that might sound stressful, but the thing you're focusing on is low effort. And that's how you, in my opinion, that's how I would describe the meditative state to someone. So running is a great example. You're not focused on how far you have to run. Oh no, a uphill section is coming. Oh no, a downhill section is coming. I ran this trail a long time. Hey, look, there's someone that's there that's not. enter a meditative state, you're thinking left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, and that's it. You're just going along the way. You're focusing on the lowest effort, repetitive process, and you'll get into a meditative state. There's a lot of names for these things, right? Runner's high is a great example of the running thing. Getting in the zone, like zoning out, applies to a lot of other things. So that's kind of when you're meditating, you're getting into the zone. The idea is to find the lowest effort thing you can do that will take you away from all that. When I start in the morning, when I'm not like exhausted yet, so like the first half a mile, or what is that, 0.8 kilometers, I'm always thinking of everything else. I'm like, how do I feel today? Well, it's kind of hot right now. I got this like I'm slightly congested. Like, how did I sleep yesterday? And then by the time I get to the end of the run, I'm not thinking about anything other than how miserable I feel. Like, I'm like, oh, my legs are like just left, right, just keep doing left, right, left, right, just. And by the time I get to the end of the run, my whole mind has spaced out. Like, there's no room to think about how I should improve my time, and that's what it is. That's how it is. This thing, when it sounds so simple, I'm even a little jealous because I can't find a thing that would. Yeah, you can get to sleep this way. Just, that's how sleep works. In my opinion, that's how sleep could be for someone. Sleep is getting into a state where if you're having trouble sleeping, you're trying to get a meditative state before sleeping. Yeah. Yeah, intrusive thoughts are incredibly hard, and I'm not saying I achieve that. I'm I'm sustaining it longer than I normally am with a lot of practice. So for example, back in the day, when I'm running, I would have an intrusive thought like every 15 to 30 seconds. So the idea is physical stress can really, really get you to the edge, to the point where, yeah, you just don't think about anything else. Like, it's actually very, very hard intellectually to think about anything else when you're basically oxygen deprived, when you're hypoxic temporarily. So finding something, it's more of a grind. It is more of a grind. It is a grind. I'm trying to improve the length. I'm trying to increase the length. And in my opinion, for myself, the amount of distance I can run is very proportional to how long I can maintain my state of cadence with my thoughts. So the more I can hold on to focusing on every breath out, every breath in, with the synchrony of my left and right feet, when it's hitting that rhythm, the longer I can focus on that rhythm, the farther and faster I can go. So, if anything, I could intellectually convince myself that there is a benefit, there is a desirable outcome if I continuously try to practice and grind my focus. And Osu is very similar to that. I am not habitually having, if I mechanically play something intuitively, it's like, that's what you do in Osu. But unfortunately, I'm not a person who intuit most of the time. So in order to benefit my Osu thing, which is a secondary goal, you might be thinking, well, there's no way me doing these drills, we'll call them drills, can help me play something without literally doing it. It's like, well, yes and no. There's a thing that keeps me from FCing a map that is invisible. Invisible to someone who doesn't struggle with it. And that is focus. I cannot maintain a cadence and consistency long enough FC something greater than 3 minutes most of the time. And we're talking about like 3% of the time I will falter. And in OSU, it's 0% or 3%, right? When you come to the map in its entirety. If I miss 3% of the time, I'm likely to choke in 3 of 100% of a song within a time limit. So the idea is, will this help me get FCs within my skill limit? Yes, it will, in a way. I mean, that's would be the logical conclusion. Am I seeking that? Not really, but it is a side thing. So I'm doing something that will effectively help me in OSU, but I'm not using it to help me in OSU. I'm using it to help me. Well, actually, primary objective. It's you. What I'm doing now is a platform to explain it to someone else. But for myself, it's also aiding in my ability to focus on a task. So I'm maximizing what I'm doing here. It might not look like I'm doing much of anything. In fact, to the bot guy who was just basically trolling with 2 names, they think all I'm doing is streaming to 0 viewers and that's probably as close as it gets. Like it's very minimal to them. But for me, whether I have 1,000 or 0, that's not the primary objective. And then all that other stuff, I'm getting way more value than just having someone watch me. Like if I need someone to watch me, I will do something to get someone to watch me. But just streaming it and capturing it is the lowest amount of effort to give your opportunity for someone to watch me and analyze what I'm doing. If one day someone comes and describes what I'm actually doing and how to even improve upon it, that's the day when Twitch graduates from being a platform for young people who aspire to do great things to a platform filled with professionals and experienced adults. So until then, I have to be very respectful, right? I'm saying they're doing the thing they want to do. Like these people, those one person or persons, they're doing what they find entertaining, and that's fine, right, to them. It's no hard feelings in my opinion. We just have a conflict of interest. So they know they're going to get banned for their inconsequential targeting of whatever they feel based on their incompetence and ignorance, but it makes them feel good. Like they chose to do it for a reason, right? So that's fair. But I can also ban them. So if they don't know that's a consequence, well, it's a good learning experience for them, I suppose. Regardless, I will be extremely impressed one day that someone comes in and basically just psychoanalyze me, right? But until then, I don't think professionals and people who actually do these things will have time to be on a platform like this and just randomly spectating. That's what I'm doing for fun, though. Like, if we got into a private chat room or something and someone's like, hey, I have this friend who does X and Y and Z on stream. Can we watch that stream? And can you tell me what your thoughts about that stream? It's like, oh yeah, sure. I'll share what my thoughts are. But those things I do alone anyways. I do that all the time. Like my favorite activity is to be useful to people. So I don't stop doing it just because someone don't think I'm important. I'm doing it in case one day that person has no other way, nowhere to go, and I could do something about it because I spent the time and effort unconditionally to observe the person. That's the idea. So, that's kind of how I find Twitch very intellectually interesting. content creation in general. You can observe people, you can observe their pattern, their products, especially live content is a little bit more telling, but post process tells a whole, like, it's a different facet. But you can learn a lot about that person, and you can know and determine what is absent too, what is not being shown. So you can focus on what's not being shown and what is being shown. That's just not how most people think about it when they are observing content creation. They tend to focus on what is in front of them, but there's a lot of details on what is not in front of them too. So the idea is to create a limitless competence in general. You focus on what you don't know from the content in front of you, and contrast it with what you do know. So often when you see a content, like a video, like a TikTok video, like, wait, what don't I see here? Okay, and then now what do I see here? And then you will know that there are things with that practice. You'll start to think about tasks, like going all the way back to this OSU thing. You'll think about tasks in that way. You'll be thinking, what don't I care about? What is not important to me? Because that's also important. It's like, what don't I want, like, don't need to happen? And what do I need to happen? And then do these things help those things, or reduce those things, or increase those things? For example, if I do activity X, which is like this tapping, right? Tapping thing, is it making me worse at anything? Instead of constantly focusing, oh yeah, well, I'm gonna get better at this, is like, but what else am I exchanging? So is it worth it? What are my pros and cons? So the hour I spent here doing this thing, what else I can do tangentially to do this thing, but even acquire more? So how do I improve that? So that's kind of the idea. You're always, I wouldn't call it min-maxing. You're constantly grinding for relative improvement, not absolute improvement. So absolute improvement is the mindset where I want to be 3-digit by the end of the year. That's an absolute improvement. That's giving yourself a deadline and a goal to hit. My goals tend to be relative. So by the end of the year, I expect to discover something that is helpful to my focus. It's not for everyone. You have to require this requires a level of competence and self-interest that does not work for everyone. The method that I'm talking about describes someone for me who went through a professional phase and then a non-professional phase. So for someone who is extremely goal-oriented and extremely reliant on objective-based feedback for their well-being for themselves, like reaching a specific goal, that is the first step. You establish that foundation to establish great self-esteem, a self-identity, and a good security with not being able to know certain things. I think those are at least 3 of 5 or 6 pillars before one can say, I can make goals that are nebulous, as in like they're very non-specific, but still be motivated to do them. If you haven't reached that stage, a person may never reach that stage. It's up to them, but the idea is you find a way to keep yourself motivated. The goal is that if it is to have a fixed goal, like I want to be this good by the end, and that's what drives you, that's the way. What I'm sharing here is an alternative way that one could experiment with and see if it works, or a combination. You're supposed to add inspiration from other people. So for me, my objective, the fixed objective, is almost entirely always justified to me. And that is to practice my communication skills and to be able to explain what I'm doing as clearly as possible with practice. So every time I go through this loop and talk about it and explain using analogies and pausing instead of going like, for example, and wishy-washy, it's practice. And intentfully doing the practice guarantees that my primary objective is achieved. Otherwise, you would not see me stream again, because at some point I will come to realize that it's not fruitful, right? But it hasn't failed me yet. So that's great. And that's kind of like a summation of what I'm doing here too. Like Osu attracts people depending on the status of the streamer. That presents new challenges, but it also helps inform me of those challenges. Like what I can say about the Osu category in Twitch, the people who have a lot of influence cannot say because they don't experience those anymore. Like they experience it very infrequently. Kind of like when we met a top player who just stops by and makes the comment that, oh yeah, that's not true. Most of my participants or viewers ask me for tips and learning experiences. And I think about it, it's like, this is your favorite phrase. It depends, but this time I can elaborate because I have observed what it's like to be at one end, and I'm able to empathize and vicariously tell them, seems reasonable at your end too, because I go and observe what I cannot be. I am not a top player. I don't desire to be a top player. If I become a top player, it's a new experience. I'll probably change up my experiences to extract from that, right? But I don't aim to be one. So I can observe someone who does it. What I was interested in when that person presented that they have an audience who likes to ask them for tips is, what do you do when they do? Like, how do you behave? How do you explain things? Well, based on how this person talked to me, who would be potentially one of his audiences that could ask him for help, he has shown zero demonstration, in my opinion, in our brief. Obviously, we are not friends, so that zero stays zero until we have other discussions. But this person at that time demonstrated they did not actively understand what it means to be asked for help, being able to provide help, and treating other people who need help or want help as someone who's a good player. So this person did not strike me as an interesting person in that context. However, they were interesting because they confirmed exactly what I know is happening in the Osu community. For better or for worse, I'm indifferent about it. It's just that is the observation now. So when they challenged me and told me that's not the case, like this doesn't happen often, well, tell me more. Explain to me how you know this. And then, the person challenged me and said, oh, so how did you come about this? Do you have like numbers or? And the only thing I could explain is all the hours I spent observing the Osu community. That's it. I have no access to like statistics. I'm not a computational science, like a computational bioinformatician or like a demographic statistics person to be able to create all of that like data that this person describes, I would be interested if that person would say, "Oh, but I can help you with it." Then I'd be interested. But the idea is this person deflected. They deflected by saying, "Oh, so how'd you gather this?" Like, well, here's the best way I could explain it. And then the mutual respect would be, "Oh, do you do this or don't you do this?" But instead, this person chose to rely on their anecdotal information and demonstrate that they have not observed anything. So what that tells me is I have to remind myself, in order to have a great discussion with this person or a coherent discussion with this person, I have to appeal to their narcissism, their self-interest, because right now they are a great player because they're self-interested. And most of the comments and observations they will have is in self-interest. If I go out of my way to say, but what about you? How'd you come up with this observation that the Osu community generally ask for help? Like, like you wouldn't challenge the person when you already observe that this person has very little interest in it. Like, the odds are stacked against you. You can still choose to do so, but for me, I typically go the higher probability route before I try the lower one, because I don't know this person. And that's the irony in a lot of things where some people are like, "Oh, don't judge a book by its cover," but where do you start if you don't? The idea is there's a difference between judging a book by its cover based on non-converging evidence, as in just feeling, like, "Oh, you feel dangerous, I'm judging by a book of the cover," then the difference between like Sherlock Holmes converging 10 different coincidences and saying, "This is where I start." So it's very different between educated starting points and filling it out. And that's generally how I cut to the chase, because we live in a hustle culture when it comes to Twitch and online. You got to get your impressions in within 1 to 2 minutes, 2 minutes max. So I determined that, I took it, and it worked out. The person was a little bit open to my idea that I don't play Osu to get PP. But the difference is I was able to appeal to this person's narcissism and then have them trust me on that. Because the difference is people say that a lot, but they have no way to describe it or demonstrate that they do. For example, someone who says, "Oh yeah, you come on stream and say, yeah, I like to play this game for fun. PP doesn't really matter." It's like, "What rank are you?" Like, okay. So you just told me two different things. You acted one way, but you did another thing. I don't do that, in my opinion. I try not to do that because that's confusing. But what that tells me about that person is they're deflecting, they're coping, as opposed to actually owning what they're saying. So the difference between what I'm trying to do when I say that is I'm not out to get them. I'm more interested in, are they happy knowing that they keep doing something that is contradictory to what they're saying. So my concern when I'm hyper focused on these things is that hurting the person? Is it concerning to the person? Is it limiting the person? As opposed to, dude, you're such a hypocrite. You just said one thing and you're doing another thing. It's like, get with the program, you know? Clean yourself up, pick yourself up, organize yourself. That is narcissism. I genuinely, when someone does something and they're saying they're doing something, I'm far more concerned if it's the reason why they're upset, like, or sharing. When you're motivated to share something, often people share what they're upset about or what their emotional state is. But generally speaking, a successful person who has great emotional intelligence can also benefit from a lot of intellectual intelligence, and vice versa. If someone's very intellectually intelligent, they can probably benefit from emotional intelligence. Because the great example of an intellectually intelligent person is they go out of the way to correct everyone. And then that's it. That's where it stops. That's a complete deficiency, in my opinion, in emotional intelligence. When you go around and correct everyone for the sake of benefiting them objectively, you have failed to exercise emotional intelligence. It's kind of, this is a slight digression, but on the internet, there was a fun poll, statistical poll, it's harmless, of pet peeves of people on the internet, like voluntarily. Obviously, there's some pre-selection bias on how the survey was acquired. One of the top 5 pet peeves for the internet are people who have zero emotional intelligence for a contextual understanding of intellectual fact. So that's really wordy, but that's kind of where I'm going with. It's a person who knows the facts, but they have no reasonable exercise of how to emotionally present the fact. It's not to say this person isn't emotionally intelligent, just when they go into the act, so the very specific act that they know a fact and it's correct, presenting it with emotional intelligence is extremely deficient. And it is the singular top 5 pet peeve on the internet. Like, based on this specific survey. I didn't really look into the methodology that much. It's probably someone who is just collecting data on like SurveyMonkey or something. So what I'm saying in a really generalized, stereotypical hot take is a know-it-all with no emotional intelligence is one of the least desirable things on the internet. And it happens every day in a comment section. There's that one person. It's the zenith, like it's the epitome of dislikes. There are other things, but this one specifically deals with the internet. So that person who has no emotional intelligence at the time, just that task of correcting something. It's not to say everything else, this person is probably really emotional and all that stuff, but just that task, like, oh, but technically the fact is this, cut. No consideration for how the wording is or any other way. They just wanted to correct what was erroneous. No emotional intelligence. Like, there's no, oh, I'm sorry, but I can see why you would get this confused, but I think this is the technical term for what you're saying. And I think most people in this particular field would consider that, but I can see how the larger audience would mistake that. That would be with emotional intelligence. It's not, and the thing about emotional intelligence when it comes to intellectual stuff is that it's long-winded. It has to deal with who you're concerned with. It's not, well, you're wrong, this is right. To an intellectual person, yes, it's not personal. It's one is wrong and one is right now. That's fair. But you basically just ignored and only concerned with yourself. You did not. So both intellectual comments and emotional comments can be self-centered. And the number one pet peeve is someone who it's like, yeah, that's not right. This is it. And that's it. It's not conversation. It's not being human. It's self-serving. And take it for what it is. The moment you write a comment like that, you have almost statistically stacked the internet against you. So careful. That's what I mean. I mean, like, you can save yourself quite a lot of trouble or make yourself very charismatic, even when texting, and making comments, knowing these things, and that these things are super interesting. I love observations like that. But anyways, let me read. Not caring for rank and asking for rank could be compatible. For example, I would like to have an estimation of how good someone is, even if I don't necessarily injure. I understand it's just so here's the thing. Here's the thing. You ask the person for rank, and you're using rank to determine how good someone is relatively. So you care about rank to determine how good someone is. So you do care about rank. Like there's no this it I would love to say subjectively there's a contextual depends and separation, but in order to appreciate how good someone is based on their rank, you have to care about rank. If you tell me you don't care about rank and you're using rank to estimate how good someone is, you can't because you didn't care about it enough to know. You see what I mean? Like it's a cyclic, it's a paradox. If you don't care about rank, you can't use rank to determine how good someone is. I can help, but let me clarify. You could say, I don't care about my rank, but I spend most of my time caring about the ranks of other people to determine how good they are. So then you can say, your rank. Right. But you're not saying you don't care. You care to know how rank is important to determining how good people are. You have not separated the two. You literally combine the two here. So your saying is you don't care about your rank, but you have spent most of your time looking at other people's rank and determined how good they are based on their ranks. But you have to clarify that it's not based on your own experience of your own rank and performance because you didn't care about it. So you shouldn't know anything about it. It's like saying, I don't care about running, but I'm a good runner. You can't know that. To care about something is to know about it. So if you use a metric that you don't care about, how accurate is that metric? It's unreliable. This is where subjective meets objective. When you take the subjectivity and try to leap over how reliable it is objectively, right? Objective is the reliable thing. Well, you have to care about something. You have to practice the skill of doing the intellectual thing in order to use it as a tool to measure something subjective. How good is a player, for example? Well, I use rank. Rank is an objective metric. Okay, do I care about rank? Well, I don't. Okay, so if I don't care about rank, how do I know enough about rank to judge someone based on rank? Well, you don't. Well, you can still do it, right? It doesn't stop anyone from doing it. You just have to ask yourself, are you ready for discussion? Because generally, someone who doesn't care about a metric is far more incompetent than someone who does. So if I care about how good I am, I have to care about rank. It's one of the metrics to show how good I am. But am I focused on how good I am now? I am not. And therefore, I also don't care about rank. One day, if I need to measure how good I am, I will have to care about rank in order to determine how I can convey that. So it's cyclic. It's a paradox. And I think a more accurate statement is you care a little bit less about rank. Like you care less about your own rank, but you do care more about other people's rank because it helps you determine how good they are. The way that specificity helps you know that you will be unpracticed in determining how good you are based on your rank. So that will emotionally and objectively help you discern why you don't feel great about your rank and how it displays your skill level. That's one of the biggest deep cuts for OSU players, where when someone says, I'm a 3-digit, but I play like garbage, it's because they don't care about their rank, quote unquote, enough to know how their rank correlates with their subjective performance of themselves. But they do care a lot about rank when it's in relationship with other people's rank. But here's the kicker. Since you care so much about how you are compared to other people's rank, you don't spend any time how your rank displays your own performance. Like, great example. I've talked to Sun for a really long time now. Sun knows that his rank displays something about his performance, and he understands where it is because he does care about it. Not that it has a disproportionate emotional impact, is he cares enough about rank to know that he is measuring his own rank with the ranks of others and his performance. So instead of saying truly a love-hate relationship with how he's performing and what rank he is, he'll probably realistically say, yeah, that's about where I think it is right now, where I'm performing, but I can do better. That's the optimistic phrase, right? But you can only do better if you have an accurate measurement of your own performance. So when you stop caring about your own rank, you can't use your own rank to help you improve because you stop caring about it. It's not a useful metric anymore. So what do I care about? I care about that percentage accuracy, and I care about that extremely long list of local scores. That's what I care about. So I spend almost all my time focused on that. And what I can truly tell you is not a day goes by do I even look at that number down there. So when someone asks me, what rank am I? It's like, I don't know what rank I am. That's the truth. Because I don't care about the rank. So there's no way I could accurately ever tell you what my rank is. My effective rank is. And then the first comment someone will say is like, wow, well, you could probably farm, you could probably do this map. It's like, yeah, I do. I understand. I probably could do that, but I don't know because I'm not focused on that. So that's kind of the one thing that hurts a lot of OSU players subjectively. The idea that it's like, oh, I should be playing better. I'm already 4K. I'm already rank 4K, but I don't understand why I'm not playing like a 3K. And in all of that mess, they're talking about how rank's not important and stuff. Say, well, that's unfortunate because if you don't think rank is important, how can you possibly even say the other statement anyways? You have no experience of connecting those. I feel like having an experience about how people at different ranks look is a side product of observing other players, but this argument is that in order to notice it, you have to care about it, and I'm not exactly sure what to care means, just different ways to say to know. Sure. So care is everything, in my opinion. What I mean is, I use a different phrase instead of care. I use active participant, active participation. So you say that you have half of the experience of how people different ranks look like is a side product of observing other players. What did you actually observe in those players? And how do they correlate with rank? So for example, if you should be able to, in my opinion, to demonstrate a level of competence where a specific rank is coordinated or associated with specific things you can observe. And you will be able to name them. It does. It does. No, it only does. I always thought care has yes, it does. But no. I don't think they're not segregated. So you're doing the thing where which is, in my opinion, the most common reason why people are confused. You're trying to compartmentalize them. To care is to objectively be able to do things about it. So to care is to know, and to know is to care. Like, it's not, I care, but I don't want to know. And I know because I don't want to care, or like I do care. They're related. You can't just separate them. So holistically, you're trying to compartmentalize them, which is erroneous, in my opinion. It's a logical fallacy. It's like saying you can be objective about something without being subjective about it. You, as a human being, cannot do that. A fact can exist as an objective thing. You interpreting the fact is both subjective and objective at the same time. It's a combination of both. Like, it's an extent of what part is subjective and what part is objective. To get to an objective conclusion, it requires subjective interpretation. They're not distinguishable. Like, you can't separate them. You can probably evaluate something that has already happened as an objective fact. Like, for example, yesterday was April 16th for me personally. Yesterday was the date, April 16th. It has already happened. You can see it. There it is. When you said, I feel like having experience about how players of different rank look is a side product of observing other players, you have subjectively tied something to an objective metric, which is rank. It's not rank is objective, and therefore my observation is objective, but it's not transferable. They're going to stay subjective, stay objective, but they are tied together. You cannot give value to rank without a subjective interpretation of rank. Rank itself is objective. Like, the number literally is objective. If I am going to show my rank today, it is objectively that number, but to depart meaning to it, it will be involved in subjectivity. To care about something is to also to know about it. To know about something means you care about it. They're not disproportionate. You can't do one in isolation. You really can't. Like, as a human being, you can't distinguish that. If you want to know something, you probably care enough to look it up or to learn about it. If you care about something, you're likely going to know something about it. But that's just the habit, and it's the extent. So if you try to disproportionate, you're going to fight yourself the entire time. And you're probably going to find everyone else who probably argue with you, and they probably argue with themselves. And you'll probably find like people who believe they're separate, and you're probably going to argue with them too. For me, I have no problems understanding you. Like, for me, I can accept that you want to do this. That's it. Like, I'm not going to convince you to take my way or the highway. If you take my way and it makes you feel happier, go right ahead. If it makes you feel worse, don't do it. There's no objectivity. Like, it's not objectively a better way to look at things. There's no objective way to better look at things as a human being. You have feelings, you have interpretations. If I told you, don't do it, you'll be happier, that would be something that I can't say without saying, don't ever listen to me if I say something like that, because it won't work out, in my opinion. You have to find the things that work best for, and have a like measurable, desirable output. Like, for me, it does. So that's where we would probably want to stop the digression, but it's great. It's a good discussion, in my opinion. What I think my take home is, I haven't met someone yet, Worm, that did what you did, what you described in 837, how you feel something out and use that metric to observe something based on how you feel, I have not met a person personally, like in my own experience, that led to a happy and successful, productive lifestyle yet. Perhaps there's someone out there that has that combination and figure out how to maximize it, but I have not come across nor have personally been in contact with someone who has made that type of argument and is extremely successful and or in their own way, like whatever they decide. I have not met someone like that yet. They often as understand that you cannot compartmentalize these things. They are ever present. You can choose not to care about them though. And that's what's kind of the great thing. When you choose not to care about something, out of sight, out of mind, and you will likely not know it either. So you won't learn to appreciate it. And they've embraced that. So some people just say, nah, I don't care about rank. And they literally just go out and say, no. And then when someone asks them about rank information, they're like, I don't care about rank, so I can't tell you anything about rank information. That's just it. That's what we call the true specialist. The person who legitimately am competent enough to know, since they don't care about something, they don't know anything relevant to that something. You can be a generalist and be like me and say, well, I know something about it, but it's not going to be good enough to know everything about it. Please tell me more and tell me your experience about it because I don't have comprehensive knowledge about it. Sometimes I care about it, sometimes I don't. I only know one side of the story. Perhaps you can complete the other side. That's the other side of things. So the one where you kind of care, but you kind of only care about certain things to know about certain things about it. Like I only know Osu from outside of the Osu community. So when I observe the Osu community, I can only tell you what I observe about the Osu community. I'm not in the Osu community. I can't say anything about being in the Osu community. So when someone like a top player comes by, they have the knowledge of what and the behavior and the experience of what it's like to be in the community. And I have the experience of being outside the community. So when that person tells me what they think about the Osu community, it's a lens into what's inside it. But I can never know that, like unless I do it. Like I can't absorb it firsthand. So that's the biggest distinction. I don't care enough to be in the community, and I specifically declare and tell them, hey, I don't resonate with the Osu community. I don't participate in tournaments. I don't talk to any of those people. But here's what I observed from being outside of the community. I only care enough to observe what I see. So these are my observations. And then that other person, in my opinion, should have said, my personal experience is this. That's it. Not what they observe, what their appearance is of the greater community. Their conversation only limits to their immediate people they interact with. And that will demonstrate that they're making a clear distinction that this is my private experience, my personal experience, and what I'm experiencing is outside. Like I'm just watching people. Like how often does a top player spend most of their time observing other players versus playing themselves? I can guarantee you I probably have spent more time looking at other players than a top player who just happened to come by. So, yes, it's a subjective take, and you're judging, probabilistically, who would you trust more? Like, so it's up to you to interpret the metric, right? The metric is observation time. A person who doesn't play at the top level, would they have more time? The probability of having, it's not to guarantee that they would, it's to guide your interpretation. Would you bet that a person that's 4-digit have more time to observe the Osu community at large than a 2-digit? So if you were to take a gamble, like odds and payouts, right? Which one would you gamble on? And that's how I interpreted my relationship with this person. The odds of them having an appropriate and accurate statement about the larger Osu community is highly improbable compared to my observations of larger Osu community. But I would never gamble against him, against me, if he said about the top Osu community, because he spends most of his time in that community, in that perspective. There's no way I can challenge that person because I'm highly unlikely, as someone who's not even in the top bracket, to have any experience or observation. So that's kind of the idea. Like, I don't care enough about the Osu community, but I also care about the Osu community just as something else. I care about the Osu community because someone else I know is in the Osu community. So I care about someone who is in. That person cares that they are in the Osu community. So that's kind of the distinction. So when and you might be thinking, but this is just technicality and stuff. You only say this if you're talking to someone else. It's like, yeah, I guess if you live by that code, that's fine. But guess what? I don't with myself. I make these distinctions because that's the difference of how much I care about myself. I care enough that I make these technicalities with myself. It is important that I remind myself I'm doing this, but not this. All these things apply to this. It doesn't apply to any of these things. So 90% of the time when I'm like exhausted and stressed out, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm having these arguments with myself. Does it really make sense right now for me to be upset about my rank? If I told myself I don't care about my rank, well, what goes into rank? Well, first of all the maps I play do not get ranked. So that kind of helps. Like, but what else is this doing? Does these represent any of the ranked maps? So in a way, you can get yourself to care about something when you didn't think you care about something too. So the reverse is true. So once you, in my opinion, maximize all the technicalities, you, along with other people, make you stronger. Like I, as a scientist, like a former scientist, or maybe still a scientist, I don't know what I consider myself these days. Peer review is one of the strongest foundations of strengthening your resolve, argument, your logic, etc. But you yourself are also that. So you can join in the review process. That's what periodic self-evaluation is. So when you have all of these, you're basically utilizing, in my opinion, all the tools provided with you, all that feedback. It's free, really. Being stringent on yourself, but in a very acceptable way, is free because you're always with yourself. Peer review may not always be available, right? But in a intellectual capacity or a group like a university or going to school and stuff, that is almost obligatory. It gives you that feedback. If you don't go to school, if you don't work for a boss, if you don't have a mentor, all that stuff, and you look reflect on your life, how often have you been peer reviewed in any capacity? That will most definitely be subjectively and objectively a measure of how likely you are great at evaluating things. If you do not have challengers, if you do not have a mentor, you do not go to school constantly being like criticized and critiqued, you have a deficiency compared to someone who did. And even if you guys are really individually different, maybe emotionally, genetically, socioeconomically, if you were to take a bet between someone who went to university and someone who just went out the door and after high school, the chances are I would bet on the university person to have better ability to constructively and critically think than the other person. I didn't say which one would be more successful. I'm just saying if you were taking a gamble, who would you choose to better critique something? Someone who spent most of their life being critiqued and have to critique other things, or someone who do what they want to do intuitively? That's kind of the distinction between someone who is educated and someone who is not educated. But neither is a great correlation to success, like the subjectiveness of success. Like there are enough human beings on this planet that either approach or either background has had an evidence of successful careers. Statistically, though, that's where objectivity comes in, and it usually is biased towards the person who is most critically raised, as opposed to a person who is just winging it based on their own things. So, like, for every one Elon Musk, there are hundreds of, there are maybe tens of, I don't know, Warren Buffett's. Like, there's still evidence for success for them. What kind of gamble are you taking? Do you want to take the gamble where it's my way or the highway? Here are your odds. That's the objective nature of those numbers. Those are the odds. And you take a subjective take on what your decisions are based on the objective odds. And for me, I can tell you that my perspective so far as a 36-year-old of this perspective that I'm describing now, it's like a drop in the bucket, but part of my lifestyle. My personal experience has that the things I'm saying now are representative of at least 90% of people who put out professionally on helping others live a happier life. That's all I can say. That's like, it's not even a real statistic. I feel that 90% of the things I've encountered and learned from agrees with what I'm putting into practice for my own life. But is 90% good enough for you to rework your entire life? Usually the answer is no, first of all. So subjectively, to be empathetic to individuals, when you ask someone, hey, you need to change your entire perspective of your life to be happier, usually that's a tough ask. It's a really tall ask, and it's a long period of time. So the answer is usually no. But the goal of these people who I'm watch and read all the time is that they try to figure out a way to get people to do it themselves, like encourage them to figure out little tweaks that get them happier over time, not to reinvent their life. And that's kind of the hustle culture. I really feel and dislike the hustle culture in the sense in the very context of getting people to be happier. The hustle culture has statistically, so this is the objective metric, correlate, right? Not causation, correlate with the increased dissatisfaction of people. So is it true? Don't really know, but it's a really strong correlation. The more you cater to the hustle culture, the more likely you're gonna become dissatisfied. Some magical thing about the hustle culture mentality that applies to millions of people at once is not transferable and applicable to one person. So whenever someone thinks about the results of millions of people and you try to apply it to your own life, one person, it ultimately statistically comes out to be dissatisfactory over time. So for example, if you did 1,000 things that a self-help book told you to do because this person had thousands of experience, like lots of people's experience, the odds of you benefiting from trying all those is that most of it's going to fail, because you're looking for the key thing that will help you, when in fact it's probably doing like 500 of the 1,000 tips put together that will get you slightly happier. It's not just one thing, because the idea is they're giving you self-help based on a gigantic pool of people. It could be 1 million, it could be 1,000 patients, it could be 100 patients. You are one person. Statistically, all that stuff, it could be like 20% of people are happier. And guess what? 20% is better than 0. And therefore, this self-help book exists. 10% could be healthier. Actually, it can go all the way down to 1%. And this is the greatest example. Scientology. I'm sorry about Scientology, but where a celebrity benefits from something, and that celebrity is the 1%, but that's enough to make a product successful. It's enough to make a service successful. It's enough to make a cult or a religion successful. Not really familiar with hustle culture exactly. Self-help, touch grass, invest in. Yeah. So hustle culture, the way I defined it is hustling. Like what I mean is when you get hustled. So, for example, things go fast, things are easy. Just do this. You're done. You're good. Like, for example, this is the only bread recipe you'll ever need. It's great. Content. This person must love bread a lot. Obviously, if this person believed that this is the only recipe they need, why are they making content about bread? You feel me about that? So when you start looking at hustle culture, it self-contradicts itself. So this is the only thing you'll need to be successful. Then why are there millions of other people who are offering different only best methods? The hustle culture falls apart. It's like applying objectivity and thinking you can be objective without being subjective. Is what you like. We're going back to the topic of how you thought care and know can be two different things. If you know something's the best, but you care enough about it, you would know that there are multiple best in the hustle culture. It's self-contradictory. Like every time someone says, this is the only life hack you need, then why are there 100,000 different life hacks for the same thing? You got hustled. Like easy life hacks, one things, self-help books with life hacks. It's not to say that most self-help books do this. I don't know. I don't read self-help books. I might have read one maybe. I'm saying the idea of it, where a book, a singular thing, a collection of idea from one person, extended from their experiences of thousands of people, somehow holds the key to your life. You're more realistically going to think hundreds of books will probably get you there. Not one book, or this is the only one-stop shop for all your grass-touching needs, or I'm the only one-stop shop for all your Twitch viewing needs. But guess what? It doesn't stop everyone from 99% of people watching one Twitch streamer. It doesn't stop 99.9% of people from buying one product. That's what the internet has bred. That's how algorithm has bred. Viewership, monetization, I don't know, subathons, all of them have created the hustle culture. And what we're understanding now is, as a community of human beings, is what are the pros and cons of the hustle culture? Well, one of the really strong cons is that when it comes to life goals and life achievements, the hustle culture has been deleterious over time. Is it true? I don't know. It's just a strong correlation that most people are going net negative in their satisfaction because of the internet. So what we do with that data is, hey, maybe we got to switch it up a little. And we don't want the human race to be net negative because they use the internet. That kind of sucks because the internet is really addicting, right? It's a great thing. It's a great tool. It gets people to do things. Let's try to offset the net negative that's happening. That's what governments have to deal with. Politicians, I don't know, even content creators, hopefully. Content creators are thinking about this. At least the content creators that I personally like to associate with are the people who care enough to concern themselves with this, where they're worried that the internet isn't tuned enough to make more people happy than sad. And that is really scary. And I don't want to see that either. But I don't care enough to gain influence to do that. I'm streaming out of personal interest, technically. It might sound altruistic by saying I want to help people and discuss things with people, but the act of streaming is self-centered. I am streaming for myself. No one has told me to stream what I'm doing, right? That's the biggest distinction. So I'm intentionally doing this. So it's self-centered, even if I say what my goals are. So there's no confusion, kind of like caring and knowing. I am specifically telling myself I'm streaming for myself, technically, but I care about other people. And I care about what other people think of the things that I'm streaming for myself, for, so to speak. And one of the things I'm really worried about is how what I say, if anyone, like one person think it's valuable, why there aren't hundreds and thousands of me that are highlighted as a group to compare it to that one person who says that's not important. So like there's no jobs that, for example, a car represents the work of thousands of people, but even in automotive industry, they still have difficulties highlighting how much work it takes of all the people who work invisibly to bring you that product. Well, live service content is a product, but it is disproportionately represented by people who have different priorities. And the priority is not your health. That's perfectly pragmatic. It's not bad or good. It's the consequences of the system. What we can do about it is dependent on what that person believes is bad or good. But the idea is content creators, for the large majority of their care, a big proportion of their care is not your health. not your mental health, not your life goals, not your, because they have so much of their time in life to be good at what they do and to sustain their own life. So that is the reality. I can seem very caring in isolation because when I choose to stream, I am compartmentalizing myself to the best of my extent to offer my attention to other people. But in no way does it compete with being a human being, which is making sure I'm healthy and satisfied and motivated. The moment you lose that sight, it's ironic, but you lose the ability to do the latter thing. So like if I'm unhealthy, like I care about other people, so I'm doing everything for other people, I'm streaming because someone told me to stream, the likelihood is that person isn't going to offer adequate things, because one of the experience points to care about a human being is to also care about yourself. It's kind of like the rank thing. If you don't care about your own rank, it's very difficult to evaluate other people based on their rank. If you don't care about yourself, you can't possibly be expected to care about other people. You won't. Where do you even start? You don't even have a starting point. Like if you can't take care of yourself, how can you possibly develop experience to care about others? You could still get the experience, but it would come from the perspective of someone who doesn't care about themselves. So how do you get someone to care about themselves to help them get better if you don't even care about yourself? You could learn it, sort of, like you can observe other people how they would do it, but is that better than someone who cares about themselves and do that? Because they're not distinguished apart. If you care about yourself, you'll likely observe other people better on how they care about themselves, and then you can evaluate them on that. So when you truly choose to not care about something, then you also have to accept that you probably am incompetent in it, and that's okay, because the main answer is I don't have time. And that's, if you care about too many things, it's just not going to happen, right? So I also choose certain things I cannot represent. I cannot tell someone what it's like to be a top player in OSU. That's just, I just don't care enough about it. So when someone talks to me about, like, I don't know, MREC and stuff, that's, I take it face value. I have no comments. I can't even make a comment about it. I can say how I feel about it. Like, oh, that's neat. But if someone says, do you care about MREC? The answer is no. If I did, I could show you how I care about him. I could say, I don't know, he made a top play last week or something. I actually don't know. I'm just making it up. Because you need to be able to demonstrate what you're saying. So if I care about you, how do I demonstrate I care about you? Well, I just spent 3 hours talking about the one statement you made. And if that's not enough to demonstrate that, then I have failed. And it would be interesting to tell me how to improve on that. Maybe you're a top player of your neighborhood. Sun's in my neighborhood, Worm. Did I already tell you this? Sun's like 15 minutes away from me. I mean, we hung out a few times. But yeah, Sun's technically my neighbor. Anyways, that's a great digression. We'll add this somewhere in here. But um to know all of this can help someone just feel okay about it. So I don't want you, I mean, like, I'm trying my best not to say that you'll live a miserable life, or there's no right way. Like, there's no way that works for you. So Yeah, we are neighbors. Like I'm like 15-minute drive away from his house or from his parents' place. And he's same here. I don't move around here. So, um just to keep in mind all the things, you don't have to remember it. You don't have to like I love repeating stuff and refining stuff. In fact, if you ask me later, like 3 months down the line, I probably have changed whatever I just said now. It's constantly changing. And that's kind of what I like about it. And the idea is one day, maybe, if I get lucky, I'll say something, in my opinion, it's me getting lucky. If I say something and that changes someone's life for the better, like you just happen to think this is great and you're really much happier and you just are happier because of it, because of the exchange, whether you know it or not, that's great. I think that's what makes doing something without that goal in mind the best thing. Like, for example, I'm doing this to share, to inspire, maybe, but I'm not doing it because I have to inspire someone. I'm not doing it because I have to save someone's life or like impact their life. I'm doing it because I like practicing explaining what I think to other people. But the secondary objectives are the personally my favorites because you don't know that they're happening yet. They're also my disfavorites as well. Like they're also my hated things because you can also, without projected expectations, you could offend people, right? You can hurt someone too. That's probably just as likely in many people's case. I would say I am practiced enough that I've helped more people than I harmed. It's not to say that it doesn't happen. Like when I mean by harm, I don't mean physically, I mean figuratively, like offend them, attack their like something, because that's the reality of the case. So, but I still do it, right? That's the idea. I'm constantly trying to talk with much more elegance and charisma. I would tell you, and often the only people that would know would be my best friends, that one of my worst skills inherently as a kid, like if I was a prodigy or I'm good at something, communication was not the top skill. But communication is my favorite skill now. So I'm not going to say I'm the best at communication because I have no inclination over my youth that I was great at charisma or leadership or communication. I can tell you it's a skill that I like doing. So being talented at something that you love, it's overrated in my opinion. But that's a different story for now. Anyways, see you next time. We're gonna play Yakuza 0. All right, let's switch over to Yakuza 0. I think we're on let's say 15. Yeah. So he, just to reiterate, yeah, he's basically my neighbor. We don't hang out very much because money. I would say money. I don't think it's outdoors or anything like that. It's really just resources. I actually think he has more expendable uh resources than I do at this point. He has a more sustainable way of, yeah, it's 15. Sorry, I had to double check. Okay. My ears. Okay, sorry, I keep forgetting to turn down my volume for this. I got confused though. So it was inherently weak, yes. Communication, and charisma was, when I was a kid, I was not inherently charismatic or understanding. I was very selfish. There was complete lack of empathy. Like I was emotionally very, very detached from everything. It was my least practiced skill. In a way, school doesn't necessarily emphasize that either, and my culture and my parents, so I don't practice that at all. So it was inherently weak, but it's hard to know if it was out of a lack of practice or just everything else. So because I'm only young once, I can't know if I had a talent for it. But it is now my favorite skill. It is probably the skill, if I had to sell something, right? If I go into a job interview, the first thing I would sell is this, because it's my most practiced skill and it's effortless. It's far more effortless. I prefer to not have to submit a resume and just do the interview, because I'm far more confident in my interviewing skills now than I am saying I make $1 million a day, I have 10,000 viewers. Obviously, I don't do that, right? Because I can't. I don't focus on it anymore. So, like, I'm not building accolades. I didn't get the award for best content creator, or I don't have a growth curve that's like 10 viewers every year or every month growing, or 1 million subscribers. I don't build that anymore. So it's inherently unpracticed and weak. I know by knowledge what it takes to do those things, but since I don't practice those things, I'm not good or sufficient at those things. But what I can tell you is I can probably sell you a product being a nobody than being Mr. Beast. I can probably sell you a life hack without having to be popular. That would be the skill I would focus on in an interview. Like, if I get you one-on-one in a room, I can probably convince you to change something about yourself, that you will trust me that I have your best interest in mind. That's what charisma and leadership is. You can develop trust when you want to. But I'm not in it for myself as much as others who are better at it than I am. So I'm not great at making money for myself, but I certainly am great at helping other people make money for themselves. Because I'm no longer interested in that, but other people are. That's what makes them great content creators. I'll be right back. I have to go to the bathroom. I'll be BRB. And one last thing that I forgot to make sure to mention, just like what I said earlier, since I am unpracticed at making money for myself anymore and making myself popular, if I go into an interview and my competition is successful and make money, good money for themselves, and care about others, they are more qualified than I am. So I know that since I'm not great at making money and popularity for myself, that is a weakness. It doesn't make me more attractive. However, I do focus most of my resources on observing other people, what works, and then transferring that knowledge in a digestible way to another person. But there can easily be a candidate that I'm competing with that does both. They are also successful and they are good at doing what I do. So, in that reality, I am a poorer candidate. The question is, how many people exist with both? How many people exist with one and the other? Who's rarer? In my opinion, statistically, as well, with some converging evidence from other people, my skill set is rarer than someone else, than the one that is like they're successful, so therefore they're going to use their success to help other people be successful like themselves. That is far more common, but far more inappropriate for a position of consultation than myself, who is predominantly in the business and interest of observing others in order to be charismatic. So, yes, the person who has both is the golden goose, but that is so improbable because the two things are very conflicting. So, who has more success in this case? It would be my skill set with the appropriate position. So that's what I would advertise. That's kind of the idea of interviews. You're advertising relevant, high demand skill sets and low supply, but high demand. So a skill set for a consultant or someone who deals with education and mentoring is far rarer than someone who is self-established and self-motivated and to like concern with themselves and their ambitions. So you can play that up. Someone who likes to work for another person is far rarer than someone who wants to work for themselves. However, ideally, you want a person who can go back and forth very dynamically. But for me, I know what my strengths are. I don't really emphasize what my weaknesses are. That's kind of the deal, right? Just to make it consistent, because we just spent all that time talking about if you care about rank, you have to care somewhat about your own rank in order to use rank as a metric. And I do. I care about my own popularity and value and as a skill set, but far less than that. And I know that that is a weakness. So when someone has a problem and it's about themselves, I will tell them I can't do much for you because I'm inexperienced in inwardly thinking about the problem is me. But I can certainly help them find and utilize other people that will help them work together as a successful unit, because that is my focus. It is my specialty in terms of communication and charisma. How help this person have the skills to cover all their weaknesses by being charismatic to others. So it's a very specific skill that just doesn't happen when you are your own business owner. When you are a content creator yourself, if you're a sole proprietor, the first skill they learn when they expand is the skill that I spend most of my time working on. The hard part to the people who are successful, because they are unpracticed in that. Eventually they make that transition, and then they'll give up their content creation life a little bit. Like, they'll probably stream less, be not directly involved in projects as much anymore. That's usually the statistically norm pattern, because they spend a lot more time developing, being a leader and being charismatic, hiring all the people, judging character enough to find reliability and loyalty, which leads into Yakuza, right? Kiryu has to struggle with this all the time. When you're in organized crime, one of the things you have to be is a charismatic person and a good judge of character. Because, like, obviously that doesn't happen in this game. Everyone backstab, like, a lot of people backstab everyone. But when you see Kiryu, like, he's loyal, but he's also loyal to a fault. So it makes him a pretty bad judge of character. However, he owns it, right? Kind of. I'm not sure. It would be fun to have like a conversation with like a Kiryu generated AI or something and ask them these questions instead of like worrying about the everyday life of organized crime. But anyways.